bodies lay there all along, concealed in plain view. Initially, they appeared as mere heaps of discarded clothing, but a chilling revelation would soon unfold, forever altering Bellevue's reputation as a safe sanctuary for families. On the night of January 3rd, 1997, 4 family members were brutally slain, and the perpetrator was too young to legally drink, too calm to show fear, and far too cunning to act alone. This wasn't merely murder. It was a calculated, cold-blooded performance, meticulously planned and executed by someone who seemed too innocent to comprehend death itself. It began like any typical winter afternoon, cold, gray, and tranquil, with a stillness that felt almost benign, even mundane. In a quiet corner of Bellevue, just outside Seattle, 2 young boys were playing in a neighborhood park. As they ran through the open field and ventured toward the brush at the park's edge, one of them stopped. Half hidden under leaves, nestled in a small cluster of bushes, was something peculiar. It looked like a pile of old clothes, perhaps discarded by a careless hiker or passerby. They glanced at it briefly, dismissed it, and returned to their games. Yet something about it lingered. Children often notice what adults overlook, perhaps driven by an instinctive unease they couldn't articulate. The next day, curiosity drew them back to the same spot. There it was again, but this time they saw it for what it truly was, a lifeless body. They raced home, voices shaking, hearts racing. One of their mothers immediately contacted the police. Within minutes, Bellevue officers arrived at the scene. What they discovered confirmed the boys' worst fears. Lying cold in the brush was the body of a young woman. She had dark hair, a petite frame, and bruises that told of a violent struggle. Her face was swollen, her hands scraped, with a cord still tightly wound around her neck, as if the killer had ensured, beyond doubt, that she would never breathe again. Her identity, later confirmed by police, was Kimberly Wilson, only 20 years old. At first, her death made no sense. She had no known enemies, didn't live a risky life, and was a bright, sociable college student, full of ambition and potential, the kind of person expected to be safe in a place like Bellevue. Yet now, she was gone, and the killer hadn't even bothered to conceal her body thoroughly, suggesting either arrogance, carelessness, or something far darker, a disregard for the very concept of justice. Detectives sensed there were still missing pieces. The Wilson family hadn't reported Kimberly missing, and no one from their household had reached out, which was unusual. So Bellevue officers headed to the Wilson residence, a tidy suburban home in a peaceful neighborhood, still adorned with faint Christmas light twinkling in the early morning dimness, but an unsettling stillness hung over the property. 3 cars sat in the driveway, yet the house was dark, wrapped in an unnatural silence that made Detective Jeff Gonfey's skin crawl. As he approached, he noticed the backsliding glass door was slightly ajar. He called out, but no response came. With his weapon drawn and nerves on edge, Gomes stepped cautiously inside, scanning every corner. The air felt heavy, motionless. He crept upstairs, hoping to find the family asleep, oblivious to the chaos outside. But what he found at the top of the stairs was beyond his worst nightmares. Blood was everywhere, streaked across walls, speckled on the ceiling, soaked into the carpet. The scene left little to the imagination. The violence had been up close, personal, and fueled by rage. In the master bedroom, the horror intensified. On the bed lay Rose Wilson, Kimberly's mother, her body ravaged by multiple stab wounds to the throat. Her face was so brutally beaten, it was nearly unrecognizable. Her head crushed by what was later identified as a heavy blunt object. The sheets beneath her were saturated with blood. Nearby, at the foot of the bed, was William Bill Wilson, Kimberly's father, who had suffered a similar fate, bludgeoned and stabbed, left to die beside his lifelong partner. The horror didn't end there. In the hallway outside the bedroom, Gomes found Kimberly's 17-year-old sister, Julia, her body crumpled on the floor. Unlike her parents, she had fought back, her arm was broken, likely in self-defense, and her face and neck bore multiple stab wounds. The attacker had been relentless, not just aiming to kill, but to destroy. Within minutes, the Wilson home became an active crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape, cameras flashing, and gloved hands meticulously collecting fragments of a family shattered beyond repair. 4 members of one household, mother, father, and 2 daughters, were now victims of a massacre that began with Kimberly and led police into something far larger. The question wasn't just who had done this, but why. And how could anyone commit such a savage, calculated act and simply walk away. As the full weight of the Wilson family massacre settled over the community, Bellevue detectives moved swiftly. This wasn't a typical homicide, it was the systematic slaughter of an entire family in their own home. No signs of forced entry suggested it wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was personal, purposeful. The killer didn't just want the Wilsons dead, they wanted them erased. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors to ask if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. But in a place like Bellevue, where people kept to themselves and violence was unthinkable, few had anything useful to offer. No screams, no loud noises, just another quiet suburban night. The detectives turned to the Wilsons' backgrounds. Bill was a respected engineer, described by colleagues as reliable and dedicated, the kind of man who arrived early and stayed late. His boss called him loyal, a dependable employee. Rose, his wife, worked in retail and was known for her warmth and constant smile. Julia, their youngest, was a shy, sweet high school senior who didn't stir trouble. Nothing about them suggested enemies. But when detectives looked closer at Kimberly, the daughter found in the park, small cracks began to appear in the family's perfect image. Kim had graduated from the same high school Julia attended. On the surface, she was a typical young woman navigating life, but her school counselor recalled tension with her parents, especially in her final school years. Arguments that simmered quietly behind closed doors, the kind of strain that builds over time. A year before the murders, a neighbor had called police to report a domestic disturbance at the Wilson home, citing yelling and fighting. Typical teenage rebellion, it seemed at the time. In hindsight, it felt like an unheeded warning. Digging deeper, detectives reached out to Kimberly's circle, friends, classmates, anyone who knew her personally. A pattern emerged. Kim wasn't reckless. She didn't party excessively or use drugs, but she had a small group of friends on the fringes, part of a clique that met late at night at the local Denny's, calling themselves the Saturday Night Denny's Club. It seemed innocent. Teens drinking cheap coffee, staying up too late, trying to seem edgy. But the deeper police looked, the darker it became. The group embraced a gothic subculture, dressing in black and engaging in roleplay games with themes of violence, power, eroticism, and death, and escape from the monotony of suburban life. For most, it was just talk, a way to feel alive. But not for everyone. Several group members pointed to two boys who openly discussed murder, so casually it barely raised eyebrows, as if it were part of their strange Denny's world. In the wake of 4 brutal killings, those conversations took on new weight. The investigation shifted from who had done it to who had spoken about it, who had fantasized about death enough to make it real. Behind the black clothes and rebellious talk, something sinister was emerging. The trail led to 2 names, Barani and Anderson, members of the Denny's group who had raised red flags with their casual murder talk. When officers visited their homes, the boys remained oddly composed for teenagers linked to a murder within their social circle. Barani, in particular, spoke with an unsettling detachment, claiming he and Anderson had spent the night of the murders at his house playing video games. A dull, uneventful evening. The story felt too neat, too convenient. Detectives, skeptical, began searching for cracks in their alibi. One clue stood out, a distinctive shoe tread found in the bloodied carpet at the Wilson crime scene, a unique pattern unlike common soles. When asked, Barani produced a pair of brown work shoes, claiming they were his only pair. Nothing unusual, but witnesses, including neighbors and classmates, contradicted him. A friend revealed Barani owned boots with soles matching the crime scene prints. His video game alibi also unraveled. Neighbors reported no sign of Anderson at Barani's house that night, despite past all-nighters. Then came a chilling discovery. 2 distinct sets of bloody footprints at the crime scene, indicating 2 people had walked through the carnage. This wasn't a solo act. It was a coordinated effort. 5 days after initial questioning, detectives returned to Barani. His calm facade was cracking. Without much prompting, he confessed, recounting the events with a cold, clinical detachment as if describing a movie. He admitted to strangling Kimberly in the park, hiding her body in the brush, and walking away. But later that night, paranoia set in. What if Kim had told her parents where she was or who she was meeting? In his twisted logic, her family had to die. Armed with a baseball bat and a combat knife, Barani entered the Wilson home through the slightly open sliding glass door. Rose was first, killed in her sleep with repeated blows to the head. Bill woke to her screams, but was quickly overpowered, bludgeoned, and stabbed. Julia fought fiercely, but Barani broke her arm and stabbed her until she, too, was gone. Before leaving, he casually looted the house, taking a telephone, a CD player, and a VCR, then walked out into the early morning, having erased 4 lives in minutes. Barani withheld one secret, the identity of his accomplice, but detectives already suspected David Anderson, whose name had surfaced in Kim's social circle. When questioned again, Anderson admitted lying about the video game alibi, claiming he was driving a truck between Bellevue and Seattle that night. He also confessed to knowing Barani's plan to kill the Wilsons, downplaying his own role, but 3 neighbors independently reported seeing Barani and Anderson leaving Barani's house together that night, heading into the dark. Search warrants revealed damning evidence: the stolen items from the Wilson home and boots with bloodied soles matching the crime scene prints, with DNA confirming traces of the Wilsons' blood. Anderson had been there, complicit in the slaughter. In October 1998, the trials began. Barani and Anderson were tried separately due to their differing roles. Barani's trial laid bare every gruesome detail, yet he remained emotionless, receiving 4 consecutive life sentences without parole. Anderson fought harder, but the evidence, shoes, witnesses, and lies secured his own 4 life terms. Years later, a 2012 Supreme Court ruling declared juvenile life sentences without parole unconstitutional, citing the impulsivity of adolescent brains. In 2018, Washington followed, vacating Barani's sentence and setting a minimum of 25 years to life. By October 2024, both Barani and Anderson were resentenced, opening the possibility of parole. For the Wilsons, there's no second chance, no parole from death. As Barani, now in his mid-40s, left the courtroom, he offered only a smile, no remorse, no words. Does a teenager's undeveloped brain excuse such calculated evil? Share your thoughts below and check out the next video. Thanks for watching.